Continue on in the book of Joshua. No, I'm sorry. No. Our last lesson was in Deuteronomy, right?
Yes.
Well, we're going to hit one lesson because it's the only lesson I think we're going to hit in Joshua this morning. But basically, it's a continuation of the theme from last week's lesson. Because if you remember last week's lesson, very in the book of Joshua here, very much like Moses did when he had his final sermon to the people of Israel, the children of Israel. In Deuteronomy, he had called them and had a covenant renewal. And what you see in today's lesson here is in this last chapter, 24th chapter, 24th chapter, we see a renewal of the covenant. And this is years later now. Because if you remember when last week's lesson, we had just crossed over into Canaan land. And so it's going to now be probably at least some 30 years later, because if you remember, it says when Joshua died, he was 110. And if you remember when they entered into the promised land, Caleb, it says, was aged 85. And Joshua was a contemporary of Caleb. Caleb was a little bit older than Joshua. So Joshua, at this point, if he's 110 when he is ready to die, this is approximately 30 plus years later that Joshua has led the children of Israel through the promised land in Canaan land. And what he does here is in his final sermon to them, he calls all the elders, he calls all the heads of the families together, and the leaders. He commands them. He reminds them of the covenant. And it's important to remember in today's lesson where it says that when Joshua called them, he called them at Shechem. And my question on that is, why Shechem? Why did he call them Shechem? I mean, other than to renew the covenant. I mean, but why Shechem?
I know it's something what Moses did, but I can't.
Okay.
Because I know he brought them together.
Okay. Let's go to, I think it's Genesis 12, I believe it is. Yeah, okay, that's a good. Genesis 12, starting at verse 6 and 7. And it says, Abram passed through the land of the place, to the place at Shechem, to the oaks of Amoreh, and at that time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built there an altar to God who had appeared to him. That's all I wanted to read right there.
That's I mean.
So when Joshua, in his final sermon, because in that 22nd and 23rd chapter, he settled almost was a civil war between two of the tribes. Well, he not settled; they had finally come to the settlement that they were going to worship one main place. And then in this 23rd chapter, Joshua calls the elders and leaders together to give them some final words. Then, and he had mentioned the fact that he was getting old, and that God had been faithful to them, and they were to continue on in God's covenant promise. So what you have here, remember now, because I need to review here. If you read the first 5 books of the Bible, and you read Joshua, you see that there was a ceremony performed called cutting covenants. These were typical of Mesopotamian ancient Near East covenants that were called suzerain treaties. And every time they did a suzerain treaty, it had a certain pattern it followed. It always identified who it was that was making the treaty. That's the preamble and the prologue. And also had the stipulations, had the blessings of the curses, and also it had behind the blessings and the curses, it had the examples behind it. So what you see here is in this whole 24th chapter, Joshua is going through another suzerain treaty with Israel that he had cut, that God had done with Moses, had done prior to Moses with Abraham. He identified himself as God, what he had done for them, what they owed him, their allegiance to him, and what the consequences would be, and then he gave them an example of that. And so what you see here is that when Joshua calls the people to Shechem, he calls them together to reinstitute or to recommit to the covenant. They have a covenant right, because the word covenant in Hebrew is it's more a covenant. It's really a covenant right. And what you're saying in the covenant is that if I fail to do my part, the way we split these animals up, the way I cut these animals up, may the Lord do to me. And that's why, if you remember in Genesis 15, that's why Abraham could not walk through the gauntlet. Who did? God did. God walked through the gauntlet. Because he said, I can keep the covenant. As a matter of fact, if you remember from 15 Genesis, Abraham wore himself out all day long after he cut the animals up, shooting the birds away. That was on purpose. Wore his butt out. Because he couldn't keep it no way. He was going to try. So he fell asleep. And he woke up. And behold, a smoking pot. The presence of God. God walking through the pieces. Walking through the pieces. Walking through the pieces. Walking through the pieces. And he says, if I fail to keep the covenant, let me be destroyed. And we know God won't be destroyed. So he's the only one that can walk through the, he's the only one that can walk the gauntlet. He's the only one that can walk through the gauntlet. He's the only one that can keep the covenant. Therefore, Abraham did not. Anyway, so what you see here is that what Joshua's doing, he's bringing back the people of Israel, the children of Israel, and it said, in the lesson, it says all the people. Now, you understand that's hyperbole, because not everybody was there, but all the representative leaders were there. All the major players were there for the people of Israel, of all the 12 tribes, when he called them to Shechem to have this covenant renewal. Because you know, remember now, even though the Bible doesn't tell you this here, it's obvious if you know the history of the Jewish people. Whenever a covenant was cut, after God cut the first covenant with Abraham, and after that he did it with Moses. If you remember in Exodus 19 and 20, God delivered the tablet of stone to Moses, his law rather. He gives him the law. But later on, you know what happens to the law? He puts the law in the what? In the Ark of the Covenant. Because it symbolizes God's presence. And whenever that covenant was renewed, the Ark of the Covenant was always present in the midst of God's people. So they gathered. The Bible doesn't tell you this here, but it says, and Joshua gathered the people to Shechem. Remember now, this time, the Ark of the Covenant was kept at Shiloh, some miles away. So he brought it from Shiloh to Shechem. And he gathered all the people around the Ark of the Covenant because they're getting ready to reinstitute again the covenant. And to swear and to lie, because they lied, again, what they were going to do. And if you remember today's lesson, and we listed it, Joshua goes first telling him, you can't keep God's what? Covenant. And I'm going to ask you what that means. You can tell me what that means, right? What does that mean? You can't keep God's covenant. I can't keep God's covenant. What does that mean? Tell me now.
Like his promises, right?
That's true.
So we can't make we break our promises.
That's true.
So we can't keep we can say we're going to make a promise to someone, but we may fail to keep it. God won't. When God makes a promise to you, he goes all the way through. He can't fail.
That's true. And
so okay.
Y'all help her out. Come on, help her out.
It's our nature. We can't do it. It's our nature, our makeup, we just can't do it. It's hard.
It's not with the temperament. Like,
But also God, even though He gives us promises, He gives us something else to in that covenant. He gives us like maybe warnings or something like that.
Well, that's part of the stipulation of the covenant. When he gives you a covenant, he said, I'm God. This is what I've done for you.
So
this
he
is what
said-
you owe me.
and then-
If you
and
do this
he
here, I'll
follows
bless you.
this
Don't,
up
I'll
with-
curse you.
Right,
But-
with
but-
something, like, he'll tell you, and then it'll follow up with, if you do this, but if you don't do this, this is what's gonna happen.
That's true, too. But this answers my question now.
So your question was, what is a covenant?
No.
Oh, why we can't keep it?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not God. Well, that's the obvious reason though, right?
That's a good answer. No, he is not. We're not God, and he ain't us.
Because we're human in nature, it's impossible for us to keep.
Remember now, the thing behind the covenant is that even the covenant symbols, it was always a what? A substitute.
Oh, yeah, it's a substitute.
It's always a substitute. We have to look beyond ourselves,
Right.
look outside of ourselves, to something that does it in our stead. And we have to be committed to that thing that's in our stead. Otherwise, we call falling away, apostasy.
Right.
Which Joshua's going to address later on. I'm going to ask you about that. Another question I got for you. You can in the lesson. Joshua talks about that later on. Tune in this lesson. Okay? So, why can't we keep the covenant?
Because it's the substitute for Jesus.
Because we're not Jesus. And we can't die for anybody's sins. We couldn't, like you said, Jesus is our substitute. Was our substitute because God knew that we were sinful people, and that we needed somebody to redeem us.
That's true. We need a redeemer. And that redeemer is our substitute. And we have to look to the substitute to keep it in our stead.
Yeah.
Behind the covenant, it's like behind faith, there's an object. It points to something greater and bigger, greater than ourselves. Something outside of ourselves that's able to do it in our stead. But there has to come with it, the thing we talk about all the time, is trust. That fiducia, that faith. The commitment to that object, or to that thing that can do it. Our faith in Jesus Christ is not faith in faith, it's faith in Him. He's the object behind our faith. What He's done. Faith in faith ain't gonna save you. The faith is in the faith of what Jesus has done for you is what saves you. Okay? But remember now, well, Joshua remembered also. Now remember, Joshua was with Moses from the very beginning.
Right.
When they came out of Egypt. Joshua had seen them at not the Red Sea, at Mount Sinai, when the mountain was quaking and storming and lightning. That lesson we had about 2 or 3 lessons a while back on that. How they quaked and how they lied. Whatever you say, what? We will do.
For that moment.
And what Joshua remembers and Joshua sees and knows from experience that they have not. And they failed every time. Even after Moses passed along in Deuteronomy, last week's lesson, they stood it again. And what happened? He told them, when you go into this land, do this, and you'll be successful.
Right.
And they went to the land, and remember now when they went to the land of Canaan, they went into the land what they call by conquest. And by conquest means that God was going before them. Which brings me to another thing in today's lesson. The hornet. I'm not sure what the hornet is.
Yeah.
That's what the hornet is.
Justin, I was going to ask that question.
Okay, I'm asking you guys, and you guys tell me, okay? The hornet. God had told them to follow a certain plan, and as long as they followed God's plan, and the way God told them to do it, they were what? Successful. When they failed to do it God's way, they lost. And you remember the thing about sitting in the camp with Achan and everything else? Because they still had their what? The idols. And still have idolatrous people.
The pagan idols.
And pagan idols in with them. And that's why when Joshua says at the end of the chapter, this verse that we quote all the time, I think we get wrong in our interpretation. He said, what choose you what? This day, whom you will serve. My other question, that I don't know, I guess the question on the first morning, is, what are you talking about right there? What are you talking about right there? But he also, because he says choose you this day whom you serve. But as for me and my house, we will, or I will, serve the Lord, Yahweh. Okay? Now, what does that mean?
What
That verse. Choose you this day. Choose what? Choose what? What are you choosing?
Choosing who you're going to serve.
But tell me now what it says in my lesson, though.
Whether you're going to serve idols or whether you're going to serve God.
Right.
What idols?
Specifically the idols that were back in the land where they came from, where
Mhm.
Abraham came from.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's one. Okay.
Back in at the Euphrates and in that
Mhm.
area.
Right.
And he also mentioned the idols in the land where they now possessed.
So he gave them a choice. His choice, the choice he gave them was not a choice. You got an out of here and you got an out of there.
Oh, that's why he said, but
for me,
in my house,
I'm over here.
I'm over here.
I'm going to serve God.
Uh-huh. You see what I'm saying? Thank you, sir. Because many people miss that. He says you had the hours before you came over here, pre-Euphrates, before the river crossing. And now you got the God of the Amorites, Canaanites over here, and you still you can't get enough of them. You said you left them behind in pre-Euphrates. You get over here, you pick up these nonsensical gods, these non-gods. Now, who's going to be your choice, yes, sir?
I think that certainly there was evidence that people were hanging on even to the old way, right? And I think it just shows that, you know, because we're like, what, 6 or 7 generations later after Abraham, and it still shows how families, people hold on to things that are, you know, 6 and 7 generations old. It's just
So true.
the habit, is what they know. I find it to be true today.
It is
because
true today.
People come to the word with a preconceived notion
Yes.
of who God is and it's based on what they learned and what the grandmother taught them, what the great grandmother
And it may be right,
taught
maybe
them.
wrong.
Maybe right, maybe wrong. But when they hear the word, they try to fit it in
That lens.
with what they already know.
Yes.
People are just,
We're built that way.
we're like that.
We like
We're
that.
slow to change, slow to understand.
But you remember when the thing that he keeps saying throughout the whole book of Joshua, remember. Remember. We have to always remember what God said and what God requires and what God has done. Remember, because we so easily forget. We forget easily.
So-
We forget yesterday. Yes, sir.
If I can just do a
Go ahead.
spoiler alert.
Go ahead. Go
2
ahead.
chapters later, Judges 2:10 says all these people died off, and another generation came along that knew not the Lord.
That knew not the Lord.
2 chapters later.
And see, and I don't, and that's bring me to another thing I want to say too. All of us are just one generation away from losing what we got
That's right.
in the Lord.
It's happening now.
And that's why I tell you, God don't got no grandchildren.
That's right.
And we need to understand that. It's because mama's a Christian, I mean you're a Christian. And there's so many of us, we so easy to pick on Christians' children. Because for example, I know some kids say, because your daddy, he's a teacher. He loves about the Lord. What about you?
Right.
Well, he ain't me, and I ain't him. The Lord may not call him. The Lord called me. I know that for me.
Mm-hmm.
God has called all of us individually. And I'm going to tell you, if you look through history, throughout the world, especially in Christendom, you can see sometimes a son follows the father's footsteps, they preach the gospel, sometimes they turn miles away. Sometimes they skip generations and then another one pops up. Then they miles away. And so what happened, you see what happened here is that, like I said, just soon after Joshua dies, because he knows their heart. And that's why he tells them, you can't serve the Lord because you're not committed. I'm going to give you an answer to that one already, because you're not committed. And see, the thing about and the thing about apostasy is this here. It's like I always hear me say, profession does not equate necessarily to possession. You can profess all you want to, how much you love the Lord, how much the Lord is your Savior. But until you demonstrate it through your behavior, through the life that you live, you have to own it. It has to own you. If you don't own it, your profession ain't gonna do nothing. There was an old preacher years ago called Butler. Black preacher came out of slavery, supposedly. He should say, "Is you what you was? You still ain't." is you is what you was, you still ain't. In other words, if you are today what you were yesterday, you ain't changed. You still are. Is you is what you is what you was, you still ain't. Oh, that being proper English. That's what he was deep. Not eloquent,
Right.
but deep. Conversion means that God's spirit resides in you. And what Joshua warns him against is the falling away and then the apostasy of professing something but not possessing it. And that's so true to the whole of Christendom, the whole of God's people. This is our history. That's why we have to look beyond ourselves and look to a Redeemer. That's why it's so important that we need to understand that you can't find yourself in yourself. You find yourself by losing yourself in Christ. Because he said he's the only way, the truth, and the life. I know what everybody takes you today. There's all kinds of ways to come to God. But I'm telling you, ain't but one person I ever hear seen in any religion that died, that atoned, that propitiated for sin. If you can't atone, you cannot. If you don't atone, if you don't propitiate, you don't satisfy God. You don't satisfy the wrath. Because the wrath is against the unjust, and the unjust has to be paid. And only one paid the price. So Muhammad, Baha'u'llah, what's the other fellow's name? Buddha. What's the other fellow's name? So many of them. You name it. Choose your, take your pick. They didn't pay the price. They couldn't pay the price. So they can't save you. Save from what? And that's why I ask sometimes, what are you saved from? To what? You're saved from the wrath of God. You're saved from God himself. And God only gave one way. Narrated it. I love it.
Yeah.
One way. And that one way is sufficient. I'm off subject here. Let's go to the lesson. Okay, what we're going to do this morning, we're going to go back to the 23rd chapter. And we're going to read from the 14th verse through verse 28 in 24th chapter. And I'm going to try to read it without kind of explaining if we go back to it.
So you said from 16.
We go back to the 23rd chapter, start at verse 14. Because it's so important that you understand what Joshua's doing here. Joshua is now 110 years old. He's old. He knows he's dying. And Joshua was a faithful servant. Which this let me divert again here. What I sent to you earlier. Now you remember now, Moses had two sons, right? Gershon and I forget the other boy's name. But he had two sons. But you never see in here in the scripture where they follow behind Moses like Joshua did. Joshua was the same age as part of Moses' sons. But Joshua took the reign. Joshua was God's general to lead him. He was Moses' lieutenant, not his sons. So there's no guarantee your son's gonna be what you're gonna be. Your daughter's gonna be what you're gonna be. Or your grandpapa gonna be what your grandpapa was, rather. God calls us all individually for his service, how he wants to use us. We need to remember that because we love to point fingers at people that because he ain't like his daddy. I like my daddy. Ain't like my son ain't like me. And then again, if they were, that's not my doing. That's God's doing. Let's read. Verse 14, 23, chapter. And now I'm about to go the way of all the earth. I always wondered where that phrase came from. I always heard it when we talk about, they always used to do the biography of Abraham Lincoln. They always talk about the way of the earth. He says, and now I'm about to go the way of all the earth. And you know in your heart and your soul, all of you, that not one word has failed. Here it says, not one word has failed of all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you. So he's saying every promise God made to you, he fulfilled before I died. And he says, all have come to pass for you. Not one of them has failed. But just as all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you, have been fulfilled for you, so the Lord will bring upon you all the evil things. So what he's doing here, he's contrasting the curses and the blessings. He says, all the good things God does, because God bless you. He kept them. But there's other side to this thing, he says. All the evil things until he has destroyed you from off this good land that the Lord your God has given you. If you transgress the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you to go and serve other, which he commanded you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and you shall perish quickly from off the good land that the Lord has given to you. He says, God has blessed you. He's given you this land by conquest. But there's some more. At this point in the Israelite history, they're at a modicum of peace, not full peace. They have conquered most of the land, but there's still little pockets they got enclaves they got to take down. But because they get self-satisfied, they fail to take them down, even during the time hundreds of years later. All with the judges, through the kings, they still failed to take all the land and to take all the promises because of sin. And Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders. And it's important that you understand he's calling all the representative heads the elders of all the tribes because they are interested to be prophet, priest, and king. And it says, and the heads of the judges and the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. And they presented themselves before God. This is a covenant renewal. And that's why I told you that's why I know the covenant of the Ark of the Covenant is there. Because the Ark of the Covenant, when they made those oaths, it had to be before the stone of testimony. It was the Ark of the Covenant. And Joshua said to all the people, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, long ago your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates. Okay, he says, before I called Abraham, your ancestors lived across in the Euphrates River on the other side. And I called Abraham, along with his fathers, he called Abraham, but Terah came. He came out of Mesopotamia and crossed over. He said, and I bought Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, his brother, Abraham's brother, and they served other gods. They had false gods. Then I took your father, he said, but then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made his offsprings many. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau, and I gave Esau the hill country of Seir to possess. But Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. You know what it says? I gave Esau the best of the land, gave him mountain. But my people went down to suffer. Went to Egypt. God's funny, isn't he?
All of part of God's plan.
God's real funny. You know, we don't understand him. How he does things. Anyway, that's what it says here. And he said, and I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with him, with what I did in their midst of it. And after I brought him, and afterwards I brought you out. You know what it says? I sent Aaron and Moses down to deliver you out of Egypt land. After I put you down there, and I put you under pressure, in the pressure cooker to make you what I want you to become. And then I brought you out of there, he says, through the hand of Aaron and Moses. And then, verse 6, then I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and you came to the sea. And the Egyptians pursued after your fathers with chariots and horsemen at the Red Sea. And when they cried to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and made the sea come up on them and cover them. And your eyes saw what I did in Egypt. And you have lived in the wilderness a long time. And I brought you to the land of the Amorites. You have lived on the other side of the Jordan. And I fought with you. And I gave, get all these verbs here. And I gave them into your hands. And you took possession of their land. And I destroyed them before you. Then Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, rose up and fought against Israel. And when he had been invited by Balaam, the son of Beor, to curse you, I made him bless you. I would not listen to Balaam. Indeed, he blessed you. So I delivered you out of his hands. And you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho. And to the elders, to the leaders of Jericho. And fought against them. And also against the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, the Hivites, and Jebusites. And I gave them to your hand. And I sent them, here we go, that's what I was waiting for. And I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out before you. The two kings of the Amorites. It was not by the sword, by your sword, or by your bow. Because what it says here, it was not by your sword, nor your bow. I have given you a land on which you had not labored, and a cities which you had not built, and you dwelt in them. You eat the fruit of the vineyards and olive orchards that you did not plant. Okay, let's stop right there. Because all this right here is what you call in the suzerain treaty, this is the preamble of the prologue. He's telling him, he give you the history of what I delivered you from and what I gave to you that you didn't earn. He's all this right here. He said, I took you out of Egypt. I killed Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea. I fought for you when you crossed over against all the enemies. Balaam, when he tried to curse you, I made it a blessing. I did all these different things for you, he says. He says, you owe me allegiance. This is the kind of God we serve. Because you didn't seek me, I came seeking you, and I sought you, and I bought you, and I gave you these things. You owe me your allegiance. You owe me gratitude. You owe me thanksgiving. You owe me praise. You owe me your life. You owe me everything. Amen. And it says, I want to go back to that verse 12. The hornet. Now, if we remember before, this has come up before in the book of Joshua, early in the book, about the hornets. Yes, some of this is literal hornets. There were big hornets in the land that God would send into the camps to drive out some of the enemies sometimes before they got there. But it's more than that, though. What do you think the hornet is? And I'm gonna give you a hint here. He said when he said right here, I deliver you and I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out before you, the two kings of Amorites, and it was not by your sword or by your bow. That should give you a clue.
You said some of it was literal, actual real hornet.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think they were real hornets.
If you read earlier in the book of Joshua, yeah.
It seems like that so much has happened, with him from like you just read, from the Red Sea all the way up to now, all the stuff he has delivered them from, and so in each scene or each place, there's been like a type of uprising or type of panic, I guess. I don't know.
Panic by whom?
That there's been a panic.
By whom?
God enforcing the people.
What people?
People panicking, I guess.
What people?
The Israelites. All these people, Amorites and all these people, I don't know. But it seems like to me that
I'm pressing you because you're up to something.
Oh.
But you're confusing the thing.
Okay, well, it's been, to me, I look at it like it's been like an uprising, like a panic type of situation. And so, to me, the hornet kind of, like if the hornet was around me, a real hornet was around me, it would be a panic situation.
Okay,
so
me too.
I would be like, like scared and,
what do we call that? What do we call that?
Terror.
What do we call terror when you're fighting people? What do you call that?
You're
Now you hold on for a minute. You remember you're part of military. You know what we should use. We use doing different countries. They do all kinds of warfare.
Right.
There's physical warfare, and there's something you should very well know. You should work in operations called psyops. You remember psyops from Joe Kotak?
I remember that years ago. Yes.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but don't ask me no questions about it now. No, go ahead. See if I can remember.
What is psyop?
Oh, jeez, Louis, I forgot.
Psychological operations.
It's a
Psychological operations.
Yes, yeah.
Psychological warfare.
Psychological warfare.
God has
Right.
the word of God delivering Israel was so devastating to those people. They panicked. They literally panicked. He says you didn't. He said you didn't do it with your sword and your bow.
Whereas they didn't cause you weren't doing a physical war.
Right. I scared the hell out of them,
Right, that's
and they
right.
ran out.
That's what I was trying to say.
You remember Rahab?
Yeah.
Rahab, when it came to Rahab, she says, she said, we know about your God. We heard about how good, what your God does for you. We know, we're scared. We are panicking.
Okay.
We are already defeated. You don't have to do a thing. We're defeated already. The psychological warfare was so great. God went before them with such terror. What he had done, they got the word spread, what he had done for them with the small number against great kings, against great numbers. That's the hornet.
Yeah, that's the hornet.
That's the hornet. It's the psychological warfare. This, what I call it the spiritual warfare, which is psychological on those people's mind, that they panicked and they feared and they ran.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, but I couldn't put it in.
Jericho is a good example. When the walls fell down, that people they panicked and they killed each other. Joshua, he didn't have to fight for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's happening over and over again in this land of conquest. God went before them. Even when they went up at Ai the second time. Remember the first time they messed up because Achan brought back the idol, the gold, whatever he sold. It was an idol, in other words. But God, he's telling him, God fights for you. God has fought for you. He sent the hornet. He sent the panic in them. They're panic stricken.
Right.
So basically, he's saying all you gotta do is be obedient. I've given you houses you didn't build. I've given you all the trees you didn't plant, grapevines you didn't plant, houses to inhabit that you don't have to build. You walk into the land, you got not a brand new house, but you brand new them. A house to live in that you didn't build. And you know, and if you think about this, just think about it for a minute. If you don't think about horticulture or agriculture, you don't grow grapevines and olive trees, bright bushes overnight. It takes at least 7 years to 30 years, according to most people I've been told, for olives to really produce this best olives, to be productive at all, period. At least 7 years, 30 years, depending on what kind of environment they're in. And grapevines don't grow overnight either, if you don't think about them, to produce good harvesting grapes. But the point he's making is that God's been so good to you, and you still don't recognize him as God. Okay, let's read further. Whom you will serve. Okay. Now, so what we see here is that we see there's a calling, and now he's finna give them the choice. He's called them. He called them together. This is what God always does. God calls. And God presents before us a choice. He says, now therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity. What it says, in sincerity and faithfulness. That's what do we call that? Commitment. So God gives them a calling, he gives them a choice, and he says, you should be committed to this thing. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond. What it says? Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river, Euphrates it is, and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if this is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, he said if it's bad in your eyes, that he ain't worthy of being worthy worship. If it's evil in your eyes to serve God, don't serve him. He said, if it's evil to serve God, he says, choose you. In other words, if you don't want God, the one that saved you, the one you hold religious to. Choose one of the ones you got that ain't done nothing for you. The ones before pre Euphrates and post Euphrates. He said, choose one of them. He says, choose you this day whom you will serve. Whether the God of the fathers that serve in the region beyond the river Euphrates, or the gods, you see with small g's, because they're not gods, of the Amorites, whose land is this which kind of land, in whose land you not dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Then the people answered, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord. See what they say? Here they go lie now. Now see now, here this is remember this is a covenant. As always, the covenant requires this is the calling and all that stuff in the prelogue and preamble. And the stipulation of what he's done for you, what he required. Then it calls for a response from the people. And what they say? Here we go. Then the people answered, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord and serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did these great signs in our sights and preserved us all the way that we went, and among all the people through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the people, the Amorites, who lived in the land. Therefore, we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. So they make a profession of faith there. And they commit themselves verbally that they will serve the Lord just like Joshua and his household. In other words, he said, we'll forget about those gods of the Amorites, whose land we occupy. And we'll forget about the land of our forefathers across the Euphrates. We'll serve God along with you, Joshua. And it says, but Joshua said to the people, you are not able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God.
Yeah.
For he is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. Let's stop right there. You see how I put that there? He says, you've seen God's hand of deliverance. You've been the recipient of God's grace, of all that he's given. And you say you will serve the Lord. He says, and you have made this profession. He says, but you can't serve the Lord because you ain't committed and because you're going to fall away. Go back to my old preacher Butler again. Is you is what you was, you still ain't. I like that saying. Is you is what you was, you still ain't. And this is what Joshua was telling them. Because you still trying to serve the gods of your forefathers, the gods of the Amorites, and not trusting the Lord, the one that saved you, that you owe your allegiance to. Okay? And he says, what verse up at? If 20, 21. Okay. And the people said to Joshua, no, but we will serve the Lord. Then Joshua said to the people, see, and this is what's important about that when a covenant is ratified, not only does it have the prologue and the stipulations, and then the cursing and the blessing that goes along with it, then it comes the part where you have to commit and go through the witness in motion. You are witnesses against you. He said you are witnesses against yourselves. That you have chosen the Lord. That you have chosen the Lord to serve him. He put it in their face. He said, you have said you serve the Lord. And not the gods of the Amorites and the across the Euphrates, blah, blah, blah. And they said, we are witnesses. And he said, then put away the foreign gods that are among you, and incline your heart to the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, the Lord, our God, we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant. That means a cutting, right? To the pieces. With the people that day, and put in place statutes and rules for them at Shechem. And why they did it at Shechem was because this is what God had told Abraham from the very beginning. He would give him that land. And that promise was made there. Abraham set the initial altar there at Shechem. And Joshua's closing it back. He's bringing it full circle. At Shechem. And he says, and Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God. And he took a large stone and set it up there on the terebinth, and there was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said, to all the people, behold, this stone shall be a witness against you, behold, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore, it should be a witness against you, lest you deal falsely with your God. So Joshua sent the people away, every man to his inheritance. So he finally gives them that piece of land that was on theirs. For his final time, he says, and this stone will be a memorial stone to remember. You may forget, but the stone will remember. And he'll be a witness against you when you turn in apostasy away from the Lord. So it's so important that we understand that we are to be committed to the things that God has called us to be. We need to be committed because we said that we are new creatures walking in newness of life. And we are called to life, even here. And that means that we don't walk in the old ways of life before we were converted, before whatever time we are committed to God to do his command. We're committed to submit ourselves, to remember, to not forget, to remember that he has blessed us, and to remember that all things come from the Lord. All good and perfect things come from above. And this is basically the thing that we have to do ourselves as Christians today, to remember and that God don't got no grandchildren. It's because you serve the Lord. I mean, your children will serve the Lord. It's because you serve the Lord. I mean, your uncle, your auntie, your aunties, or whomsoever will serve the Lord. But you let your own witness be a testimony against you that you have committed to serve the Lord. Amen?
Amen.